Hi, so this is another video on Sport of Kings, just to give a little insight on how to organise and manage your stable. I'm not saying there's any right or wrong way, it's just the way that I do things. Basically, Sport of Kings, it's a learning curve. You just have to try different things and find what works for you. So how I start is my stable. I divide my stable, my horses up into different groups. You can assign horses to your groups and edit them here. So I start off with the horses that I consider championship class. They go in the first groups, and then we go possible future championships. Then we drop down to maybe just good class runners, and we go all the way down. I go all the way down to average and poor runners, just so I've got everything grouped. I know what sort of races I'm aiming these horses for. Now I'll run through a little bit as to why I put certain horses in certain groups. For instance, the top one here, this one is already a champion, so he can compete. He's proven he can compete at the highest level. I've kept his runs down, even though he's a 5-year-old. He's only won 6 races in his life, and the first of those was a maiden, which means he can still run in the senior championships with no penalty. This one, he's running in the 3-year-old championships. 7 furlongs doesn't suit, but maybe he can compete next season, or he can compete in the 6 and 5 furlong championships possibly. This one, again, this is a 2-year-old. I'm basically basing it on, he's won a race, won quite nicely when he was on 22nd divorce. I keep a record. He was only 70% fit, 70% mature. So it's possible, based on that time there, if he gets 3 separate chunks, they normally could be up to about half a second each, which would put him 58, 57. High 56s is the kind of time you could expect him to run, which would be about the level required for championships. So that's what I base that on. He's only won the 1 race, so as a 3-year-old, there'll be no penalties for him. I also keep a look on these, the stable record. What you want to see is green training. That means the horse is training in the top 5%. That's no guarantee how it's going to perform on the track. I mean, that's just its training. How it performs on the track, you've got to see that for yourself. You've got to race the horse to know how good it's going to be. Now these, you can see, these are yearlings. Now let's click on one of them just for comparison's sake. Now, we don't know the maturity of a yearling. We never know until it turns 2. So, but we do know what training times it's doing. We can see a green star there and lots of blue stars. Blue stars are top 25% based on all horses' training times on the site. Now, if that horse, when it turns 2, if its maturity is very low, 10%, 20%, then I would consider that definitely a championship contender. On the other hand, if it's already 30, 40%, it would just be a good horse and not a championship contender. But again, I can't stress enough, it doesn't matter what training times your horse is doing. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. The only thing that matters is how your horse runs on the track. So if you have what you consider to be a really good horse, it's a very good idea to run in a big early season maiden, and that'll give you an idea where your horse stands currently with the other best horses, because you're not going to pay. This is a subscription site, right? So the races basically are free. The normal races are free, but you get token races which cost money to enter, and the championship races cost the most to enter, and they're going to be most informative on whether your horse can compete or not. And once you decide that your horse can compete, you need to look after it. I mean, as a 2-year-old, you can win a maiden without a penalty. Any other win after that gives you a £2 penalty for the final. So you need to be very aware of that, whether your horse can, you think it's so good it can carry a £2 penalty successfully. And then the same thing applies to the 3-year-old. You can win a maiden and then 2 other races, and after that any other win is a penalty. And as a 4-year-old, it's 5 races plus a maiden. After that you get a £1 penalty. As a 2-year-old and 3-year-old, it's a £2 penalty. So you need to look after your horses. If the championship class, don't pile on cheap wins. It's also important that you're aware of what finals are coming up. When the finals change every season, this is your notes page. You can put all kind of notes in here. I always have a list so I know what finals coming up. Your horses are complex. They'll run some distances, they'll run some different go-ins that they'll like, and different distances they can't do. Even if they're classic, they won't do all 3. If sprint, they won't do all 3, and so on. So you need to know which finals are coming up that are worth targeting, whether it's worth targeting a final with a horse, or whether it's worth to just run it out. I mean, if you've got to wait 3 seasons for a suitable final, that's maybe not worth it. So one of the other things that can help you is the heart. It says it's a willingness to compete. I mean, some people think it's more to do with the breeding side. I'm not too sure, but I guess it's always better to have a full red heart. Although, having said that, there are black heart horses who have won championships. It's not a bar to success. Also, of course, the sire and dam of the horse is very important. I mean, that could give you a good guide. This sire, this is a champion itself. This sire is also a champion. It won a classic final. It's a Breeders' Cup winner. So if you're starting from a good point there, if you're starting with a previous champion, you can see the sire of this horse, obviously, aside so many good horses, it's a good line. But as always, you've got to race the horse to know. He's got to prove itself on the track. Every horse has to prove itself on the track. There have been plenty of horses doing massive Green Star trains, smashing records all over the place, and they come to an actual race and they flop. They're out the back, out with the washing. Proof of the pudding, as I say, in the eating. So, as I say, my horses are all grouped up, and depending on which group they're in, that sort of decides what races I'm aiming the horses for. And there are some here that they're just unrated because they're they started like 10% maturity. Some that were so really poor, but don't know what I'm going to do with those. They're probably all going to be retired at some stage. And I have here horses that are potential breeders. They could be decent horses, and they could have good hearts and what have you, but they're too young. You have to be 4 to retire them. You can only pasture them now, which means they're gone from your stable. So they're kept here until they're 4, and then they'll be checked whether they're any good as breeders. There are some that there's just no races for them at the moment. They're resting, and I put in there others that are actually in rest, but they don't show up on this page. You have to go to your horse management to see the ones that are in rest. So again, I will stress you have to race your horses to see how good they are, and determine what level to race them at. And the quicker you work that out, the more successful and I guess profitable your stable will be. So that's basically it for this video. That covers how I organise my stable and how I determine which races to target for them.